I want to start this morning's sermon with an introduction and an addendum before I begin the actual sermon, which I prepared for this morning. And the introduction is this. I think it is fitting that yesterday, children led us in the march for our lives. And today, Christians remember another march that was undertaken for our lives over 2,000 years ago. Palm Sunday is as much about reclaiming human dignity in the face of senseless violence and occupation as yesterday's march. As much about honoring the value of full humanity as it is about honoring the King of Kings. It's important for us to remember that as we go through this day. And my addendum, and I know that addendums usually come at the end, but this one's coming at the beginning, sorry. For most of my pastoral experience, I have gone along with the general wisdom to make this Sunday before Easter a combination of Palm and Passion Sunday. There's good reason to do that. The most often cited reason is that for so many people, Sundays are their only experience of our faith story. And the Passion story, the story of this coming week, is part of the most important story of our faith, a very important part of that most important story of our faith. And so we need to take time to tell it. This year I've decided instead to focus on the story of the Palms, of Jesus' entrance into Jerusalem riding on a donkey. I do understand the general wisdom, and I too suppose that it is human nature that we want to go from Palm Sunday to Easter, if it were possible, to go directly from the triumphal entry into Jerusalem, with palms waving and children singing, to the Easter morning scenes in that beautiful spring garden where flowers bloom and birds sing and the tomb sits empty. From Hosanna song to resurrection song, as it were. But in fact, the trail that we are called to walk this week is one from Hosanna song to somber silence, and only then to resurrection song. It's not a fun or easy path to follow this last week of Jesus' life, especially those 24 hours that began with the beautiful but somewhat awkward Seder that we know of as the Last Supper, and end on a cross not too far from the city, not too far actually from the city garbage dump. Maundy Thursday and Good Friday are really all part of a single narrative that is called the Passion. In the ancient Jewish calendar, a day ran from sundown to sundown. So from sundown Thursday to sundown Friday was a single day, and all of the events of Maundy Thursday and Good Friday happened from the Last Supper to Jesus' death on the cross within that one single 24-hour day. A horrible, miserable day, and at the end of it, Jesus is dead. It's an awful week. But my friends, if the Sunday that's coming is to have any meaning, we must experience it in all of its pain and despair. The suffering was real. The death was real. The tomb was real. It must be, or what happens on Easter morning is meaningless. And so I want to invite you, strongly invite you, encourage you to take part in the events that are offered when we can experience this Holy Week in our area. If you're able to, attend the noontime Holy Week services at Kennebunk Baptist Church. This is a tradition that dates back to the times when the factory workers were able to come on their lunch hour to worship, and it was a half-hour service so that they had time to come and get back to work. If you can make it, come and pray and meditate on the meaning of this week of Jesus' Passion during the open sanctuary time here in the mornings all week long. And especially if you are free, come and join us Maundy Thursday morning for communion to commemorate that Last Supper with Jesus' disciples. Or on Maundy Thursday, attend the Simple Supper and Worship at Christ Church, or the children's service in the afternoon, or the communion service in the evening at St. David's, or the Maundy Thursday service at Wells Congregational, or another service at a nearby church on Maundy Thursday. If you can make it, come to the Good Friday service here at 7 o'clock on Friday, when we'll hear the whole story of the passion and the death of Jesus. And in it all and through it all, take time for your own devotions. And so I'm going to ask the ushers now to pass out a folder that you can use for your devotions this week. And I encourage you to take it home with you, carry it around with you. Think about the readings as you go through your days this week. If we can walk through the Holy Week experience, then we will come to Easter ready to receive the joy and the hope and new life that are offered to us on that special day. We'll take just a moment while they pass these out. Thank you very much. And now let's turn back to Palm Sunday. Parades are amazing. They awaken the child in us. I remember going to the Santa parades in downtown Bangor when I was little. And then beginning when I was in the 10th grade and playing the flute in the Concord Carlisle High School Band, I marched in the Patriots' Day Parade in Concord, Massachusetts. No longer a parade watcher, but no longer a bystander, I became a participant. As a parent, I went to the parade watcher status again. I recall going to the 4th of July parade in Thomaston with my infant son, and later being in North Louisburg, Ohio, watching John on his decorated bike riding with the other kids by in the parade. Later in Newport, Maine, I took 3-year-old Tess to watch the parade with her friend Jared. And then later, Bob and I watched many, many times with all 5 of our kids as they took their turns marching with the band or the scouts or so on and so forth. I have frequently pastored churches where one of the big summer activities still is to create a church float and ride in it. Sometimes singing, sometimes playing in the band, sometimes dressed up to represent the early church founders, or standing in the front pretending to preach to represent a church service. When I arrived at the church in Holton, Maine in 1999, the first thing that happened, that first Sunday, which felt like a welcome just for me, was this huge parade. Others thought it was the 4th of July parade, but it really was a welcome, I'm sure it was. There's something about parades which attracts our attention. Perhaps that's why Palm Sunday has always been a day which catches our attention. Even back in 30 AD, the people loved a parade. Imagine the exhilaration in Jerusalem that day, the excitement and enthusiasm of those who knew that Jesus was coming. Jesus is coming to town. Some say he's a great teacher, others a great healer. Still others say he's the Messiah, coming to lead the people of Judea against the awesome might of Rome. The crowds were anxiously waiting as Jesus made his way into Jerusalem. Riding on the back of a donkey, he rode from Bethany along the winding road. When he came to a bend in the road, he could see the walls of Jerusalem just beyond the Kidron Valley. Rising majestically above the walls of Jerusalem was the golden dome of the temple, flashing brilliantly in the morning sun. As Jesus passed through the city gates and entered into the city, a great shout went up from the people. Hosanna in the highest. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna. I'm sure in your mind's eye you're visualizing that scene. Let your ears be filled with the beautiful sound of Hosanna, Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest heaven. And as they shout, they line his way, his parade route, with branches. Visions of the prophets danced in their heads. Messianic hopes pounded in their breasts. Jesus, riding at the head of this parade, commanded the attention of everyone in that crowd. For just a few moments today, we will bask in the time of victory and glorious expectation that is Palm Sunday. The account of Palm Sunday is one of the few events in the New Testament that is recorded in all 4 Gospels. The details vary. Each gospel writer's focus and perspective is different, but the major details remain the same. As we visualize this great event, I want us to focus on three things. Yeah, 3-point sermon, you're right. The manner that Jesus entered the holy city, the reaction of the crowds to his coming, and finally, its meaning for us. First of all, notice how he came. It was time for the Passover celebration. The Passover was one of the three major feasts that Jews are supposed to attend to in Jerusalem. As a result, at that time, the population of Jerusalem swelled immensely. As a good Jew, Jesus was coming to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover with his disciples. In preparation, he did this very unusual thing. He instructed his disciples to borrow a young donkey upon which no one had ever ridden, so that he could ride it as he entered the city. He also equipped them with a response in case they were questioned about taking this animal. They were to say, "The Lord needs it, and will send it back shortly." There is in some quarters some speculation that Jesus had this arranged previously, and that this was the code words that would let the owner of the donkey know that the time was right. Jesus and his followers had probably come by foot all the way from Galilee. But now, for these last 2 miles, Jesus is going to ride a donkey. This was, I believe, to fulfill the prophecy that's found in Zechariah 9, verse 9. "Rejoice greatly, daughter Zion. Shout, daughter Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and victorious, lowly and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." And so, without questioning their master's request, the disciples did as they were instructed. They procured the young donkey, just as Jesus had said. After borrowing the colt, the disciples placed their cloaks on it as a saddle so that Jesus could begin his journey. This is a significant method of transportation. Jesus did not ride in an ornate chariot or a large and imposing white horse. He rode a young donkey, a small donkey, an insignificant animal generally thought of as a beast of burden. In some ways, this was a foreshadowing of what was to come in the week ahead. Meanwhile, at the same time, on the other side of the city, Pontius Pilate was entering Jerusalem about the same time, and he was riding a mighty horse, the symbol of war and power. In contrast, Jesus riding that young donkey as a symbol of peace and humility. Notice the manner in which he came into the city. Second, notice the reaction of the crowd. Mark notes that as Jesus entered the holy city, many people spread their cloaks on the road, while others spread branches they had cut in the field. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not about to lay my cloak or my coat on the road in front of a donkey. You have no idea what might happen to your coat. But that's what they did. They were so excited about him coming. John is the only gospel that describes this type of branch that they laid as being a palm branch. And yet that's what we have picked up, the palms on this Sunday. So important. Victorious kings were honored in this fashion in biblical times, the red carpet that was laid before them, cloaks and branches. Many in the crowd believed that they were welcoming a king. They anticipated that he was about to lead an insurrection against the established order. They did not realize that Jesus' kingdom was not of this world. While he rode into the city, the crowd was singing, "Hosanna in the highest." Songwriters have done more to capture the beauty of this day than any preacher could possibly do. For many in the crowd that day, this was a moment of marvel and adoration. Now, there definitely were cynics there, as there are today. A donkey? Peasants throwing branches? He may as well have driven up in a banged-up VW hippie van. We're used to seeing our royalty roll by in a Rolls Royce or a Mercedes, or very least a fire engine. The values of this world are not the values of God's kingdom. Some people were there simply out of curiosity. They were following the crowd. They saw the excitement and wondered what was going on and just started shouting like everyone else. Writer Eric Hoffer once commented wryly, "When people are free to do as they please, they usually imitate each other." We know that's true. I read somewhere a story about a man in Utah who put this follow the crowd phenomenon to good use. He had bought a store, but it was not doing very well. No one would come into his store to see the merchandise, so he had almost no business. Now, he was on a main road, so that was not the problem. People just didn't stop. One day he got an idea. Knowing that most people follow the crowd, he went out and he bought several used cars and parked them in front of his store. And now, people stopped at the store to see what this was going on that so many people were interested in. And they began to buy his stuff. They assumed that all the cars out front must mean this is a great place to shop. The same thing happens with churches. Some people are attracted to a church because their friends are there. There's nothing wrong with that. It's an incredible first step to invite our friends to come because our friends are here. We come into worship for a variety of reasons. Some of us come into this room with a sincere desire to know God's will for our lives. Others are seeking a workable faith for their lives. Still others come because their family expects it. If I were to ask you today why you are here, think about what your answer might be. In Matthew 16, Jesus questioned his disciples. He said to them, "And who do you say that I am?" And Simon Peter answered, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered him, "You are blessed, Simon, son of Jonah. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father in heaven." Jesus did not want Peter and the other disciples to believe he was the Son of God just because he said so. He wanted God to bring them to this conclusion based on their experience with him. If you are still uncertain about who Jesus is, this is the greatest place in the world for you to be. Walk with Christ a little while. See for yourself who he is. So first, we notice how Jesus came in, and then we notice the reaction of the crowd. And that brings us to the third thing that we need to see today. What does Palm Sunday mean for us? For each of us, it may be different. Just over 52 years ago, on March 4th, 1966, Beatles superstar John Lennon caused a worldwide storm when in an interview with the press, he claimed that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus. Do you remember that? Questioning which would go first, rock and roll or Christianity, he added that Jesus was all right, but his disciples were thick and ordinary. It's them twisting it that ruins it for me. It was obvious at this time that the Beatles were not singing "Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." Now, led by Paul McCartney, they were singing, "In my times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, whispering words of wisdom, let it be." Much, much later, the Beatles' former drummer Ringo Starr said that he found God for himself after taking the long and winding road. He admitted that he lost his way when he was younger, both as a Beatle, experimenting with marijuana and LSD, and afterwards when he suffered alcohol and cocaine problems in the 70s. But he eventually became a teetotaler, giving up alcohol and drugs and quitting his 60-a-day cigarette habit. He later said that religion now plays an important part in his life. It's so sad that sometimes people have to get in such a bad way before they realize there is a better way. The Bible teaches us that There will come a time when God will reign in every heart. Psalm 118 tells us that there will come a time when every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Palm Sunday foreshadows that great event. Looking at the four gospel accounts together, it becomes clear that triumphal entry into Jerusalem was significant, not only to those people who were there to witness it, but to Christians throughout history. So today we celebrate Palm Sunday to give each one of us the opportunity to both remember and experience that momentous occasion. Over 1,000 years ago, an Italian bishop named Theodulf was a prisoner in France. And from his jail cell, he wrote a poem that Christians have been singing ever since to remember the day that Jesus entered Jerusalem. It goes like this. You may remember it from a few minutes ago. All glory, laud, and honor to thee, Redeemer King, to whom the lips of children made sweet hosannas ring. Thou art the King of Israel, thou David's royal son, who in the Lord's name comest, the King and Blessed One. He is our Redeemer. He is our King. He deserves our allegiance. He deserves our all. As we sang this great hymn earlier this morning, I hope that in your mind's eye, you were able to put yourself in that crowd, welcoming him into Jerusalem. I thank you that so many of you put yourselves into the parade as we welcomed him into this place today. But even more, my friends, as we sing My Jesus, I Love Thee at the end of our service today, it is my prayer that you will also welcome him into your hearts and into your lives.